3 minutes to blast off. If you got your cell phones, turn them off. You don't want to be that guy or gal that interrupts me.
Yeah, that's mine.
That's yours. I won't touch it, Jen, I promise.
So, I realized my throat was going dry and I made it so the whole stack of them. I hope somebody needs more of it. So it's in
We're not going to let this go right. That's right. Okay, it's 2 o'clock. Sit down, Janice. Okay, I got my marching orders. First thing, stand back from the mic. Don't go off script. Tell everybody where the washrooms are. Out the door, hang a right. You can't miss them. There's 2 of them. Everybody else turn their cell phones off. YouTube land, hello. Hi, my name's Michael Romano. I'm a longtime friend of Jean and Glenn. I'd like to welcome you to a celebration of life. And you're probably looking at me wondering why I'm wearing a yellow jersey. Got to stop moving around. If you don't follow cycling, the yellow signifies exceptional talent in all aspects of the race. Glenn was that, an exceptional man. He was a loving husband, a dedicated father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and he was an inspiration to everybody who knew him. Over the next hour or so, we're going to celebrate Glenn's life. For those of you that would like to say a few words and you're not on the program, you'll be afforded the opportunity during the open mic piece that's in your program. On completion of the program, we're going to head downstairs and we're going to have a little snack and reminisce about Glenn. And we're going to have one of his all-time favorites. I know you think it's beer, but we're not allowed that. It's peanuts. So that's a heads up. If you're allergic to peanuts, stay away from them. Okay, so I'm gonna, as the program goes, you just follow along, so I'm not gonna get up and announce the next person. They're just automatically gonna come up here. I'll be over in that chair in case we get sidetracked, because we're on the clock. So I'm honored to be the first person to speak about Glenn. Today we pause to honor and remember Glenn, a friend whose presence left a yet indelible mark on all who knew him. He was the kind of person who valued connection over pretense, finding joy in the simple things of life, and the shared moments that defined true friendship. How I'll miss our 7:30 Sunday morning coffees. The coffee was hot, it was black. I didn't knock on the door, I just let myself in, and we solved the world's problems one sip at a time. We had our lazy, hazy backyard beers. It was always non-brand named. We'd eat some peanuts, and we'd talk about the world. And you know what? Glenn always said we were lousy consumers because we had non-name beer and buy in bulk peanuts. The bike rides. Few words were spoken, just a steady hum of the pavement beneath our tires. Those rides were a meditation, a shared silence that spoke volumes about who Glenn was. Steady, dependable, full of unspoken wisdom. I'll give you an example. He said to me, it doesn't matter if it's safe, or no, it doesn't matter, as long as it's safe, it doesn't matter if it's illegal. So of course, when you're riding across Canada, we're along a busy freeway in Ottawa. And I hear this blip, blip behind me. You know how the cops come up and they give you that kind of a little toot with their little thing? So we pull over and this young officer gets out. We walk up to him and he kind of looks at us and asks us, didn't you see the sign that says, no slow vehicles? But with the motto, as long as it's safe, it doesn't matter if it's illegal, we thought we'd go there. So Glenn talks to this young fellow and explains we're riding across Canada. And no, we really don't want to put our bikes in the back of his cruiser because there'll be a break in our trek. We'll be missing whatever amount of road there is between the car ride and the next exit. So we said, we'll get off the next exit. He said, yeah, go ahead. So we did. We rode up to the next exit and got on. Luckily, it was the one we wanted, otherwise we'd have probably gone 2 more. Over the course of the trip, we did 60 nights in hotels. And to reinforce our lousy consumerism, I would think that it was maybe 2 of them that would have got a star. The rest, the only way they'd get a star, if it was in their name. They were filled with story the nights. We didn't fight. Glenn had that gift for harmony, for finding joy in the journey and peace in the quiet moments. He didn't need to fill the dead air. So here in this quiet moment, we celebrate Glenn's life and the countless ways he enriched ours. Though he is gone, his spirit will forever hum in the background of our lives, much like the tires on those long, peaceful rides. He was a friend, an adventurer, a philosopher of life's simple joys. Though Glenn's tires may have stopped spinning here, his spirit will keep rolling alongside those of us lucky enough to have known him. He was a rare breed, a constant reminder of life's beauty found in the simplest of things. Right now, we're going to listen to one of Glenn's favorite artists and songs, Louis Armstrong, It's a Wonderful World. Following that, the speakers are just going to come up in the order in your program, introduce themselves. So just sit back and enjoy the presentation and Glenn's celebration. Thank you.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I never knew. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Ooh, yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you know, I'm John David Yungblut, Glenn's son. I'll be making some remarks, but I'm going to do that at closing. But I have a poem that I'll do my best to get through. There's no rush. You may have thought I didn't see, or that I hadn't heard life lessons that you taught me, but I got every word. Perhaps you thought I missed it all and that we'd grown apart. But Dad, I picked up everything, and it's in my heart. Without you, Dad, I wouldn't be the man I am today. You built a strong foundation no one can take away. I've grown up with your values, and I'm glad I did. So here's to you, dear Father, from your forever grateful kid. Thank you.
Yeah? Perfect. I'm Jennifer, Glenn's daughter. Oh, gee, I don't know if I should take my glasses off or leave them on. I'm at that age. Okay, what can I say? Dad was the most kind and caring man I have ever known. Sorry, Chris. He was not outwardly demonstrative, but this wasn't necessary. His little acts of kindness were many, and I never doubted that he loved me. When I was little, he always had time for me and taught me so much. He was a feminist, too. Perhaps not too many people knew this, but Dad taught my brother to use tools. That goes without saying. But he also taught me the same patient way that he taught everything. I was allowed my own bit and brace. If you don't know what that is, it's like a handheld screwdriver and a hammer. And once I mastered those, I got to use the electric drill. Do you remember the old gray corded electric drill? It was heavy like crazy. Let's see. I got my first teaching job right out of Teachers College, which is unusual, partly due to my knowledge of tools. Thanks, Dad. Speaking of teaching, Dad must have inherited his teaching skills from my grandmother. She was a teacher. Dad taught me many things, but the thing that took ultimate patience was teaching me math and calculus. Yep, wow, did I struggle. And he was so patient, he would re-explain in a different way until I got the concept. And I did, too. I went on to take many math courses in university with my solid basic understanding given to me by my dad. Let's see. I did manage quite well. It was still hard, but I managed. I can remember my dad trying to teach me some first-year calculus over the telephone from Queen's University. That was not the easiest thing to teach over the phone. We didn't have FaceTime. We didn't have anything other than just an ordinary telephone. My dad also coached my hockey team and taught me to ski. One example of his patience parenting was demonstrated on the ski hill. One day we were skiing and there was a big storm and I fell on one of the more challenging hills and refused to get up. I was too scared. I insisted it was too scary and I couldn't see where I was going. Dad negotiated with me for a few minutes, sighed, and told me he was going on without me. Of course I got up and followed him. I stayed close enough that I could just see the backs of his skis, and we made it down alive. Let's see. I knew I could handle it if he thought I could, so I just went for it. Dad taught me to drive, and since we had an automatic and a standard car, he determined that I must learn to drive the standard before I was allowed to drive the automatic. I have since discovered that teaching a child to drive is probably the most terrifying thing that average people do in a lifetime. Dad took it on with the calm demeanor with which he approaches everything. He did, however, take us, and I say us because I got to try when John was learning. And he took us to a graveyard where presumably we couldn't hurt anyone. And there were some nice little roads with intersections, and that is where we learned to drive. I continued this tradition of teaching both my girls to drive standard before they were allowed to drive the automatic. And also having lessons in a graveyard. So the tradition continues. I didn't have a curfew as a teenager, but Dad had a way of making me want to please him, and I definitely wanted to do right by him. I remember one day after a particularly late night return home, he said to me in his totally non-confrontational tone, "What time did you get in last night?" I told him it had been around 2 a.m. I wouldn't lie to him. And he said, "That's a little late." Then I asked him, "What time do you want me home?" He said, "Before midnight would be good." So that was it. I got home before midnight after that. Dad did many things. He worked for Shell and Energy Mines and Resources, as well as the government with Energy Projects International and the CNSOPB, the Canada Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board. I finally learned that. He also spent many years as a volunteer committee member and on the board of directors of Red Pine Camp, the summer place that we go. At Red Pine, he was equally comfortable working with Billy, the camp custodian, on a repair project, or at a board of directors meeting discussing the 5-year plan. He could be found on the paddle tennis courts, sailing, leading a water regatta team, even though water was not really his thing, or sitting on the bluff overlooking the lake, reading a book. Merci, c'est pour moi. Merci, mon amour. She figured I needed some water. Dad liked woodworking, and for a time went off to the local high school once a week to use the shop. What a thing, that wouldn't happen these days. They had open shop and you could go do anything you wanted. One of the things he built that all of his grandchildren and great-grandchildren will have fond memories of is a crokinole board. And they probably all played crokinole on the kitchen table with Dad. Last but not least, how could I talk about Dad without talking about biking? Dad biked all over Europe and France, Italy, Romania, Bulgaria, Germany, all across Canada. And many of Dad's younger friends and family who used to accompany him on bike trips stopped biking at one point. And I suggested that Chris go with him. And in 2017, they took off on a trip to Bulgaria. They had such a good time that the next year I thought, I don't want to miss that. And I'm so happy that I decided not to wait until I retired to go on a bike trip with him. Dad was always game for a challenge, and we did some biking trails in Ottawa that were less than ideal. I did have to patch him up once after an unfortunate encounter with a tree root. He biked on, blood running down his leg, horrifying everyone he went by, but he was fine. When we finally got to McDonald's, which was our destination for coffee and a muffin, I ran off to the drugstore and got some bandages and bandaged him up. Of course, I offered to go and get the car and come and pick him up, but no, this is merely a flesh wound. I'll bike, and he did. Fortunately, we got home about 2 minutes before the Durette show hit Ottawa. Huge storm. And we got home, we had our bikes parked, and the wind hit, and the bikes went flying, and we just got inside just in time. The trail that we rode had several trees go down after that. But just our fortune, we got home in time. In closing, I hope to have as long an active and satisfying life as my dad, and will try every day to emulate his calm, caring demeanor and ability to find joy in days that are even not ideal. Here's to you, Dad.
Hi everyone, my name's Sigourney if you don't know me, or Siggy, known by my grandparents. I'm always as Siggy. This is my daughter Marcelly, she's definitely going to feature in this. Come here, you good? Okay, apologies for that. Okay, I just want to say a couple of little things about Grandpa. There's so much I could say, but I wrote this on the plane yesterday, so sitting down to write this felt impossible. I'm flooded with so many memories of my grandpa. Thought I wasn't going to cry till the end, but sorry. Travels, bedtime stories, silly games, magical childhood moments that he and Grandma created at holidays and summer vacations. I can't see. But it seems like I'm reminded of Grandpa most often in the day-to-day by food. A crispy apple. He used to impress me and my sister Pelly by breaking one in half with just his hands. And I'll forever think of him when I eat apple pie with a slice of cheddar cheese. Don't knock it till you try it. Maple walnut ice cream. Lots of my earliest memories here in Calgary involved ice cream and a park. Tomato and pea plants. The first thing I ever grew myself was in Grandma and Grandpa's garden. I can see him in the kitchen peeling potatoes for Christmas dinner with my mom, or making ribs for supper in the summertime. In comparison to some of the grand adventures we had with him, these seemingly mundane moments will stay with me. I'll feel his spirit with me most in my kitchen, my veggie garden, and of course, every time I crack a cold beer with a few peanuts. Thanks.
So I am the nephew of Glenn Ross Yungblut, and my surname is McLennan, so therefore you understand what part of the clan I come from. Glenn, I can say simply, was, for most of my life that I remember him, since I was about 5, served as a mentor throughout my life. And just to give you a little background, I'm in downstream chemical production. Glenn, what would be called upstream chemical production. He knew where the oil was to be found and where to get it, both onshore and later on offshore. And he was an expert, considered to be a world expert in offshore production. He was involved in a number of organizations. The obituary, I think, describes a lot of his accomplishments, his roles that he had both in the private sector, i.e. Shell Canada and Shell Worldwide, and also with the National Energy Board, and was instrumental in formulating some of the policies which we still have today, for better or for worse, in Canada. So it has affected not just this province, but this entire country. And it's a fairly substantial contribution, and when people are involved in committees and committee work, both in the private sector and in government, a lot of this stuff goes unsaid because it's privileged communication. And then when the press gets a hold of it, when they release it, it becomes better, you know. So there's parts of it that are not known, but part of it is that he might be a little bit more underappreciated, basically, in terms of his contribution to this country. And it is a country, and part of the challenges of the country, it's a federation. So it consists of a collection of provinces which come together, are bound under our national charter, which we call the BNA Act now. That's enough of that. So we know upstream, downstream production of chemicals, sort of what I do. I was involved in about 4 startups, but I won't even get into that. Glenn, I think, certainly outdid me in terms of travel. I've been involved, I think I've lived in about 8 or 9 cities in Canada, the United States, and Glenn might have actually beaten me on that, as well as Jean. But I have 2 anecdotes, stories to tell, vignettes about his life that personally affected me and that I'll always remember with fondness. And after his passing, you know, I had a week to sort of consider them. And the first one is a little bit of introduction here, is I used to spend some time in Halifax. I was a graduate student at that time at the University of Guelph, and I would, thank you very much, exactly. I would go down to Halifax with another professor that I knew at Dalhousie University, and I was doing a joint research project there. And Glenn would sometimes periodically be in Halifax, and of course he was well connected with people in Halifax, mainly with the oil industry. And so through his intercession, we got to actually tour a boat, a fairly famous boat. It's called or a ship, we call it. It's barely a ship, it's about 200 feet long, and it's there today. And it was under restoration. It's called the HMCS Sackville. And it's the last remaining Canadian corvette, well, around in the world. And it is berthed at the Maritime Museum in Halifax, downtown Halifax. We, under Glenn and his influence, got to go on the ship and had a private tour by a guy that was involved in the restoration of the HMCS Sackville. And we went on it was the whole afternoon, I remember, and we went from stem to stern. We went right from the very bow all the way to the top down to the keel. And this took probably about 3 hours or so. And the guy was very knowledgeable about the Sackville. And the 2 of us were sort of awed by this thing because it's literally a living museum, and it was still under renovation, shall we say, or refit. And finally, I asked the guy as I turned out, I said, "Thank you very much for this great tour of Canadian history. I'm glad it's still floating, and I'm glad it's still there." And it reminds me a lot, of course, of the Battle of the Atlantic, which every Canadian should know about, and our contribution that we played to that in the war effort. But I turned to the guy and asked aside to this fellow, and I said, "You know, what's your relationship with the Sackville?" And he said, "Well, I crewed on this ship on this ship, the HMCS Sackville, during the Second World War, during the Battle of the Atlantic. And it's just something that happened, and Glenn organized it. It was a thing he did, you know. We go and have dinner together when he was in Halifax and that. So I always remember this with fondness, and being with Glenn, because Glenn was very knowledgeable of these kind of things. He's an engineer, so we could talk about these kind of things. That's the first sort of vignette or anecdote as part of my eulogy to Glenn Ross Yungblut. My second part is a story that he told me, both personally and through a letter. And when he was working as a consultant with a group of people, both Americans, Canadians, and other people, and the whole idea was to resurrect the production in the Russian oil industry, sort of shall we say, post-Soviet Union, when there was a sort of a federation and all sorts of things happened. So that was in the early 1990s. And he made a number of trips to the Far East. When I'm talking about the Far East, I'm talking about Eastern Siberia. So we call it the Wild East, not the Wild West. So if you were involved in oil production, that was considered the Wild East. And he would spend about a day, exactly. We would spend about a day getting a visa so he could actually go to Eastern Siberia, because it was a restricted area, and still is. And from there, if he was lucky to get his visas, he was able to get on a plane and would fly to Novosibirsk. So this is an exercise in geography, but look when you're on your tablets or whatever where Novosibirsk is, but it's the geographic center of Russia. It's very, very far away from Moscow, and it's very, very far away from Vladivostok. So he would fly to Novosibirsk with a team. They would wait there maybe a day, maybe 2 days, and a plane would show up, and then they would fly to the Far East, where all the production was. And these are thousands and thousands of miles. It's an enormous country. So on this plane, it was a Tupolev, which are noisy and very smelly, and it's also overloaded, because everybody brings all their stuff on there, because they buy the stuff from Moscow or whatever, and they bring it with them. And so what happened when he noticed, Glenn, pretty observant, I think was sitting in the aisle, was that a dog got on the plane. A little dog, little white dog, got on the plane. And hitchhiked a ride on this plane all the way to where they were going in the Far East. And when the gate went down, the door went down, the dog proceeds to exit the plane. A couple of days later, 3 days, 4 days later, they're trying to get back on another Tupolev. Same dog arrives, gets on the plane, and hitchhikes a ride to Novosibirsk. And that story, I mean, you can't make this kind of stuff up. I mean, it just happens, especially when under conditions where things are a little bit more rough than they are here, say. But those are my two vignettes about Glenn Ross Yungblut. And it will serve as part of a eulogy, part of my own personal recollections of Glenn, as well as the bigger thing about his contribution to Canada, to this country. Okay, thank you.
Watch what magnesium.
Oh, the prairie lights are burning bright, Chinook windows are moving in. Tomorrow night I'll be Alberta bound. Though I've done the best I could, my old luck ain't been so good. And tomorrow night I'll be Alberta bound. No one I met could ever forget the Rocky Mountain sunset. It's a pleasure just to be Alberta bound. I long to see my next of kin, to know what kind of shape they're in. And tomorrow night I'll be Alberta bound. Alberta bound, Alberta bound. It's good to be Alberta bound. Alberta bound, Alberta bound. It's good to be Alberta bound. Alberta bound, Alberta bound. It's good to be Alberta bound. Alberta bound, Alberta bound. It's good to be Alberta bound. Oh, the skyline of Toronto is something you'll get onto, but they say you got to live there for a while. And if you got the money, you can get yourself a honey with a written guarantee to make you smile. But it's snowing in the city and the streets are brown and gritty, and I know there's pretty girls all over town. But they never seem to find me, and the one I left behind me is the reason that I'll be Alberta bound. Alberta bound, Alberta bound. It's good to be Alberta bound. Alberta bound, Alberta bound. It's good to be Alberta bound. It's good to be Alberta bound.
Well, and to say a few words, please.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Ann Welsh. John has asked me to do a couple of readings, but first I'd like to say a few words about my experiences, well, over the last many months while Jean and Glenn have been home and ill and spending time with them. Morris and I lived across the street from Jean and Glenn in the 1990s. We moved away after a few years, much to Jean's disappointment, but remained very good friends, often going to Stage West and having wonderful dinners and visits. I've been visiting Glenn and Jean regularly throughout the duration of Glenn's illness and Jean's falls, her fractured shoulder, rehab, and coming home to John's care, and I've enjoyed meeting Jennifer and when she was able to be in town. Glenn's life, as well as Jean's, has been so enriched because of John's continuous presence in their lives. His dedication, continuous compassionate care for his parents has been unwavering despite many challenges. He entered a whole new realm when needing to find services from Alberta Health Services, and he accomplished it royally. His attention to detail, even often rearranging the house to make it safe, his creativity, ingenuity, tenacity, and planning, and humor has been the savior in their lives. He has involved his children and grandchildren in this journey with Glenn and Jean, which was very uplifting for everyone. What's better than having your kids and grandkids around when you're not well? I work with seniors in care and have not witnessed this level of attention and devotion anywhere. Glenn was able to live with as much comfort as he did because of John's willingness and desire to create the possible life for him, the best possible life for him. John was always trying new approaches to create peace and comfort for them, even taking them both to Ontario when they were not very well. Most of us would not have endured that or taken it on. Life would have been very different for Glenn and for Jean without John's presence. There is no question about how grateful Glenn was throughout his illness. John continues to be there for Jean, making her life as pleasant and fun as possible. He finds the most creative ways to keep her alert and forward-thinking. She seems to be thriving, riding her bike every day, sometimes twice a day, and finding ways to make life fun and humorous. Thank you, John. Death is Nothing at All, by the Reverend Henry Scott Holland, St. Paul's Cathedral in London, 1910. Death is nothing at all. It does not count. I have only slipped away into the next room. Nothing has happened. Everything remains exactly as it was. I am I, and you are you. And the old life that we lived so fondly together is untouched, unchanged. Whatever we were to each other, that we still are. Call me by the old familiar name. Speak of me in the way which you always have. Put no difference into your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed, and at the little jokes that we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, and pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without effort, without the ghost of a shadow upon it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is absolute and unbroken continuity. What is this death but a negligible accident? Why should I be out of the mind when I am out of sight? I am but waiting for you for an interval, somewhere very near, just around the corner. All is well, nothing is hurt, nothing is lost. One brief moment and all will be what it was before. How we shall laugh at the trouble of parting when we meet again. One other reading John would like to have read, the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness and for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me. In the presence of my enemies, you anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Hello, hi, good evening. I'll just position myself accordingly here. I have to admit, I had quite the words to share on my phone, and I haven't been able to find that or locate that, which is fine because it's best spoken from the heart. So I know my Grandpa Glenn. He's a man of few words, a soft-spoken man. But I have had the pleasure of knowing the man my whole life. I can say, honestly, he is my hero. He always will be, and he has been the light in my day for years. I can find comfort in previously knowing that I could phone him at his phone and he'd answer and say, and provide me with knowledge and advice to keep me going as a young man I am. I like to reflect a few things about my grandpa. One, his wittiness and his persistence to solve a problem, no matter how big the problem may be. My grandpa, he showed me that no matter what life brings you, it is within yourself to create the outcome you desire. So he coached me a lot as a young man, a man of God and a man of society, and in having to control myself willfully and to be able to presently show you who I am. So my grandpa, he taught me many morals, his ethics, his guidelines to life. Those were just a treat to be able to be shared. One of the things that he taught me was that just persistently keep going, and no matter what happens at the end of the day, that it is up to me to be able to take everything in life, no matter the positive or the negative circumstances, and take those in any situation for the better and to change them for myself and for others around me. I have to say I admire the presence and the amount of love that he gave my grandma Jean, my grandpa Glenn. And I can say that I have witnessed love unconditional through my eyes. And it's a blessing to be able to witness, because not many people are able to witness that. He withheld a lot of prejudices, as maybe a common man might have. He believed that family superseded blood, and you didn't have to be part of blood to be part of family. He taught me that you, just as his adversaries before, you must judge a person on their content of their character. And that has really helped me into distinguishing realities from farcities. I have committed myself every day and the day after my grandfather's death, that I have committed myself to living a legacy worth living and honoring him in ways I can do so, little ways and in big ways. I am a Christian, and I can proudly say so. And as a Christian, I must honor my family and God. And to honor Glenn is to create a fostering and harvesting environment for my children, and to be able to have him live on through my children and for generations to come. So I know that this isn't the end, because as a Christian, death is not the end. I will meet him again in the afterlife, and that will be a pleasure, because right now I believe that just like a telephone line, that telephone line, there's no one answering, but one day he'll pick up the phone and I'll say, "Hey, Grandpa, it's been a while." So, till then, and I appreciate everyone being here and sharing their respects to such a kind and honest gentleman that we all have had the pleasure of having in our life today. I hope that everyone in this room can take some good thing and live by that every day in a little quiet way to honor my grandfather, honor a husband, honor a brother, honor a dad, an uncle, a neighbor, a member of the community. So just thank you very much, and thank you for being here and honoring such a great man.
At this point, we're going to open up the floor. I understand Norm Miller would like to say a few words.
Hello, everybody. I had the great fortune to work with Glenn in several different capacities. Long ago now, but on the west coast of Canada, drilling offshore, at the Vancouver Island, the Hecate Strait, and then again on the east coast, off the Scotian Shelf. And Glenn brought his expertise. There was probably no one else in Canada that could come close to matching his capacities in the work that he was doing with Shell at that time. Such a great leader. And then he went to Ottawa, which would seem strange. Well, why does an oil man go to the government? And it wasn't long after before I followed him there and worked with him. And it's quite a thing, I think, for people to be outstanding in one walk of life, like he did with Shell, and then again, outstanding for the government of Canada. If you can just imagine, when the offshore was opening up for exploration in the late 60s, early 70s in Canada, the Canadian government had no expertise at all in the realities of operating and carrying out operations in this frontier, this sometimes very stormy and difficult frontier. And Glenn took on this role and worked to help bring an understanding between the industry and the government of how this really all works, because he was able to marry those from both sides. And when Glenn, and then again, I had the opportunity to work with Glenn again with EPI, Energy Projects International, with other associates, and reunite some of the old gang. But what I really want to emphasize is, as Glenn worked through his role in government and then into the boards, the offshore boards, he was able to bring so much knowledge to the operations of many companies operating in that environment. And it had a great deal to do with safety. I mean, Glenn played a big role in being able to help the government to understand and the industry to understand how it works, and the environment and how to care for the environment. Glenn was an environmentalist through his operational expertise. And I remember some company operators would come to Ottawa to get permission to do something or other in their operations, excuse me, and thinking that this is just the government, I'll get what I want and I'll get what I need. But Glenn would stand there and he would reason with them and bring them into an understanding of how it needs to work if they're to be successful and the government's going to get what it needs in terms of that safety and environmental care. So, as was indicated earlier by an earlier speaker, I think Canada owes Glenn a great debt for what he did and the way he performed his role in all his work. Thank you.
So I'm going to start open the door to anybody who wants to say something coming up. I'm Chris Shaw. I'm Glenn's son-in-law. My wife is Jennifer, his daughter. And I have a little written speech here. But one thing I'm sure you all noticed was Marcelly, our granddaughter. Yeah, thank you, Jen. Our granddaughter roaming around here and babbling away. And it reminded me what a great affinity there was between Glenn and young kids. And there's many of you in this room who are now older, a little bit older, and some of you a lot older who remember when you were little kids, you were either grandchildren. I guess many of you would count Glenn as grandpa. And he just had this magical connection with kids. This is harder than I thought. Oh my God. So I wanted to tell you two little stories. One is, so when Sigourney and her younger sister, Pelly, who's about a year and a half younger, were little, we could not leave them with anyone except Glenn and Jean. So we had to wait for them to come to Ottawa before we could go out, even for like half an hour or for dinner. And they were totally comfortable with Glenn and Jean. He just had this magical way with them. And I can remember him tucking them in at night, and what he would do was they would get in bed, and they would lie down, and then he would take the covers and jam them in around your little body, so they were like tucked in like a little roll. And they really loved that. They thought that was great. And one other little incident I remembered while I was sitting here a few minutes ago was, I don't remember exactly how it happened, but Pelly got in the car with Glenn, and I guess the window was down, and she turned to Glenn and said, "Okay, Grandpa, let's take a tour of Ontario." So she was ready to go off on an adventure, didn't care, about anybody else being with them or not. She was just totally happy. So those are the two little thoughts I had before turning to my little formal speech here. So Glenn, Jen and I met in late 1989, it was, I think, November, and started going out together in January. Before she had even met me, Jean asked Jen, "How old is this guy?" Jen replied, "Older." I met both Jean and Glenn a few months later, and in spite of the age difference between Jen and me, they both warmly accepted me. And in July 1993, Glenn became my father-in-law. And over the next 32 years, Glenn was indeed the best father-in-law ever in many ways. And you've heard many people talking about things that he did at various times. So for me, from skiing at Sunshine in Lake Louise to biking in Bulgaria, across England, down the Danube, in Calgary, and many times in Ottawa, often ending at McDonald's or Timmy's for coffee and a muffin, or just sitting in the late afternoon sunshine at Red Pine or many other places enjoying a beer and the many mentioned peanuts, preferably the Virginia ones with the skins on, they're the best, and great conversation. They were all great times. So thank you, Jean, for your great partnership with Glenn. And thank you, Glenn, for being the best father-in-law ever. Thank you.
Okay, batting cleanup, where is Mr. Eckmeyer? Oh, there he is, present. Oh, Jade. Oh? Okay, you help yourself.
I'm back up here. I just wanted to make a real quick announcement that my significant other and I are expecting a baby boy October 21st. So the Yungblut name will continue on.
Or maybe it might be too tall for me.
No, it's good.
Good.
It's on.
I might-
It has good range. Pretty much any.
Okay. Well, I'd like to speak first of all about Glenn's life and career. No, that's not good.
Glenn's early schooling was in a one-room country schoolhouse. But then, when he went to university, he was second in the class, 200 engineering graduates. So I think we can get an idea of just explaining everything in his life subsequently. He passed up the opportunity to accept a scholarship at Cambridge University in England to come west and become part of the early development of the oil and gas industry. This from a fellow who as a young kid was earning, was it 10 cents or 30 cents an hour to stack sheaves of wheat and oats. From a young fellow who, to earn his way through university, he did receive an Ontario Hydro bursary. And that's relevant to me because it was a bursary that very much helped me also. Glenn worked in the Delco steel mills, blast furnaces, in Hamilton, Ontario for 2 summers, which financed going on to the next year. He worked for everything he got. He started as an engineer working in the geologically complex foothills areas of Alberta. And he developed many skills there. He was sent to Houston, Texas to work with scientists there in the development of new tools and techniques for the offshore exploration. It was quite in its infancy in those years. Following Houston, he took on management responsibilities for both the west coast and east coast of Canada. And as I think as Norm has said earlier, a brilliant fellow, a leader in so many areas. We're all blessed to have known Glenn and to have worked with him. We're also fortunate that Glenn survived a helicopter crash off the coast of Oregon, December 23rd, just coming on Christmas Eve, in 1965. Struggling in 55-degree centigrade, Fahrenheit, make that 17 degrees centigrade, for about 5 hours before being rescued. And that was very fortuitous because the helicopter was not on its planned circuit. It was very close to being a much different story. Glenn accepted a government position in 1971 responsible for developing the oil and gas regulations that would control how matters proceeded in the offshore areas as we approach towards the era of the venture gas field development, the Hibernia oil field. In 1980, he became a partner, as Norm has attested to, with a consulting engineering firm, providing the offshore drilling and production services to the major oil and gas companies operating not just in the offshore areas, but also in the Beaufort Sea. In the venture gas field, in the Hibernia oil field. Subsequently, for 8 years, he was a senior manager with the National Energy Board, overseeing both Northwest Territory and Arctic drilling and production operations from a regulatory point of view. As well as managing the oil and gas pipelines department at the NEB. Tremendous responsibilities, but he brought people together. He got the job done. He got it done properly. This was followed by 11 years as chairman of the Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board. It has a new name, and Jennifer, I have trouble with that one too, so we'll stick with the old name. And in his final 2 years, working years, he was the sole Canadian representative on the Canada-US Task Force addressing safety and security concerns for cross-border pipelines. Truly an amazing career over 54 years. But Glenn was foremost a family man, dearly loved by his wife Jean, son John, daughter Jennifer, 9 grandchildren, and 15 great-grandchildren. This involved moves from Edmonton and Calgary to Victoria, to Dartmouth, to Ottawa, and finally back to Calgary, westward bound. Work assignments took him to many different countries, experiencing different cultures and living conditions around the world. Glenn supported, encouraged, and provided sound advice to friends and associates during both good and difficult times. He was always able to see the positive side to any situation. Glenn was well-read and willing to discuss current affairs. He enjoyed golf, sailing, racket sports, downhill and cross-country skiing. But most of all, he loved and was an active cyclist into his 91st year, something that some of us are still hoping to achieve. Over a period of 3 years in segments, as Mike has attested, he cycled across Canada. And he also enjoyed many cycle trips to Europe with family and friends. He may be the only person who has cycled the Lake Louise, Radium to Golden Circuit on a three-chain bicycle, 3-speed bicycle, 3 levers, and most of us have 11 or 16, and now some of us have e-bikes as well. And we're still not doing it. Okay, I think a lot of people recognized his outstanding person that Glenn was, but a few comments from the obituary section. People have written in. A wise and gentle man, worldly but down to earth. His humor, warmth, and loyalty made every moment better. An inspiration to all of us. One always knew where one stood with Glenn. Valued among fellow professionals. You felt enriched by time spent with him. Quiet wisdom on many subjects. Always a positive attitude. Plain common sense. Instilled in us a desire to do our very best. He was my mentor, a smile along with a dry sense of humor, a truly remarkable man, a social and charming person who valued personal relationships, an exceptional engineer, exhibiting professional knowledge with a calm demeanor. A life well lived, and from one contributor, he taught me to properly fry a steak. On a personal basis, I've known Glenn for 65 years. I worked with him at Shell Canada in government and as a consultant for many of those years. I've traveled with Glenn for work and for pleasure, and at times I've lived with Glenn. He was conscientious and committed in all of his endeavors. He had a knack for practical solutions, whether of a technical or personal nature, and for achieving a consensus in the face of conflicting views. I've enjoyed racket sports, skiing and cycling with Glenn, as well as socializing with both Glenn and Jean. Like many, Glenn has been my best friend for all of these years, and I'm glad I was able to say that to him before he passed. There is one word that captures how I would like Glenn to be remembered. The word is integrity. My hope, in particular, is that the grandchildren and great-grandchildren will choose to honor Glenn by example and deed. And I think Jade was making reference to the same point. But what does integrity mean? It signifies a code of ethical and moral principles. It shapes everything we do, how we treat others, and how we make decisions. The dictionaries and Google and ChatGPT all provide varying interpretations, but it is captured by the following characteristics: honesty, sincerity, truth, fairness, respect, kindness, responsibility, and accountability, dependability, compassion, cooperation, gratitude, and forgiveness. Examples of which are: if it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it. Keeping a promise. Leading by example. Living by your values. Being true to oneself. Consistency between words and action. Respecting others. Respecting cultural differences. Courage and authenticity. Sticking to one's principles. Respecting family and societal values. Glenn, may you rest in peace.
Okay, thank you, everyone, for coming. I appreciate everyone that's here, especially my family. You know, there's lots to say, too much to say, and I won't say any of it. It can be left unsaid. You know, everybody knows who Dad was. Dylan exemplifies Dad. Jade exemplifies Dad. Lily and the rest of the grandkids, they all exemplify Dad. Sometimes less is more. I could talk to you all day. I could tell you how when Dad was on the East Coast with Norm Miller, how he used to negotiate for a drilling rig from Sedco with George Bush Sr. I can tell you that he used to go down to Washington, D.C. and meet with Homeland Security because he was responsible in Canada for protecting our oil and gas. I can tell you about his helicopter crash. I can tell you about playing pickleball with him up until 2 years ago. I can tell you about just sitting and listening to Dad. I think Jim wrote in the obituary, he called Dad the baby whisperer. And he really was. He just had that ability that kids didn't feel threatened. They didn't feel like they were going to be told, don't do this or do that. No, he was just there for them, you know. And I just want all the grandkids to know he'll always be there for you. When you achieve something great, he'll be there, Lily. Everybody's going through trying times, some people in my family. But we'll make it through, because if we ask ourselves, what would Dad tell us to do? What would Gramsci say? We'll stay on the right path. It's impossible not to. If we maintain the values and not all the political opinions he had, but some of them, then we can't go wrong. You know, everybody's here because he touched them in some sort of way, or many ways, or every way. I had some sad times in my life, but having the ability to spend almost every minute of the last of Dad's life with him, it was the most beautiful and at the end the most gut-wrenching thing I've ever gone through. But I've been through a lot in my life, so I know just pick your head up, let's go, you have a family to take care of. You got kids, you got grandkids. I'll tell you one quick story, and then that will really describe Dad. I was going through a terrible breakup at a point in my life, and I was working, and my family had left, and I used to call Dad every night, and I used to talk to him, and I'd be psychoanalyzing and this and that, and oh my God. And I'd go on for like an hour long, and he'd go, and I'd go on and on and on. And then I'd finish, and he'd say, okay, that's good, now get up and go to work. And it was the best advice I got in my life, right? You know, Jade used to call me for stuff and ask me questions, and I'd talk to him for a couple of minutes, and he'd say, oh, never mind, I'll call Gramsci. So I was bypassed. So I give credit to Dad for the way that Jade has turned out, and Brittany and everybody else. I want to thank Joey and Jackie and Vanessa and Dylan and Ray and the kids for all coming down. I appreciate it very much. Dad would be very happy. So without any further ado, again, I could go on story after story after story, but I don't think it's necessary. Maybe I'll make a video and I'll put it in the link to the description of this video. So if you want to see part 2, you have to sign in online and you can see part 2. So thank you, Mike, for all your contributions and your everlasting friendship and help, along with Janice. Thank you so much. Jim, thank you, and Myrna, thank you. Patty, thank you for coming down. Thank you guys for coming down. Thank you, John, for coming. I appreciate it. Carolyn, I appreciate it. Thank you for being there. I'll now, for those who wish, I'm going to recite the Lord's Prayer. We'll conclude this service and we'll reconvene downstairs and get the party going. Yeah? Okay? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, and forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Thank you so much, everyone. If you have anything else, go ahead. If not,
downstairs.
yeah, okay.
Okay, change of plans here, kids. Back in. Jean's gonna say something.
Two. Testing. Oh, excellent.
All right, I don't know, this looks pretty complicated. There you go, Jean. Let her rip.
Oh, I wanted to say how much I appreciate it. Just a minute, I gotta take a drink of water. And it's a real tribute. It's a real tribute to Glenn's memory to be here today. God damn it! I get rid of this wobbly.
That's okay. You can wobble.
Okay. Jennifer's given me permission to wobble. Anyhow, thank you so much for just showing up.
We love you, Grandma.
Right?